Yeah, I'm James Irwin. I'm here from Kingston School of Art, where I'm doing a practice-based PhD. I'm coming to the end of about 5 years in. Yeah, thank you very much for having me. It's great to hear everyone speak yesterday. I'm looking forward to hearing the other speakers today. So what I'm going to talk about, I'm going to read through the kind of introduction or laying the ground to the project, a bit about the methodology, and then I'll show you the practice-based research that I've made over the last 5 years, or the culmination of what I've made over the last 5 years. So I'll carry on. I'll start reading. The research project I'm going to talk to you about today, titled When Code Becomes Image, Tapping the Digital Black Box for Signs of Life, stems from working with digital media within an artistic practice to try and carve out a space within the digital that feels somehow human. When I started this project 5 years ago, I was making lots of images with software that used heavily layered visual effects to enhance the digitality of the surfaces, moving slowly away from photography to work with purely synthetic visual language, a machine's eye view, a xenophotography that operated according to techno-semiotics. Throughout this process, the images generated by the machine I was steering rarely spoke back. They seemed to be defined by a lack of vitality, exhibiting an unlively flatness. Looking at them was characterized by an absence of felt, embodied feedback. The images felt dead. It was almost as if the ontological flatness of the digital image apparatus, the local desktop computer, its digital screens displaying images generated by its onboard graphics card that worked with information stored locally on the hard drive, was somehow reflected as a flat, effective response within my body as I looked back at the images. These images were all generated using software confined within the black box of the computer's casing. They were non-networked and local. I'm tapping the digital black box for signs of life to try to make digital images and sounds that do speak back. If we zoom out to the wider societal frame of platform capitalism, mobile imaging technologies instantiate a constant flow of digital images through our bodies. The effects of banal image content have been theorized through the writing of Yasmin Ibrahim. Whilst the subject of my inquiry prioritizes style over content, these images, from selfies to food photos, perhaps prime those senses for disinterest, training our instincts to scroll on for more, more, more. These lived experiences of unlively digital images, combined with the provocative ideas explored by the late British scientist James Lovelock in his book Novacine, where he speculates about the evolution of silicon-based life, have motivated a search for signs of life within contemporary digital media. If silicon-based life exists today, then what processes can be used to tease out ideas about what it might look and sound like? Recent advances within creative AI systems, such as the large language models popularized by ChatGPT, and the text-to-image generators that have captured public imagination, serve to strengthen the metaphor of the black box. But the ontologies of AI are different from those of digital image in general. They aren't reliant on the screen or the local information stored on a hard drive as a medium through which to produce an image. They work through the data center and its catalogued data sets of text files, images, and metadata. Throughout these ontologies lies a sediment of layers of hidden human labor, and it is within these AI systems that some of the practice-based research that I will be showing you today has evolved. Seeing as most of us use these AI applications through a graphic user interface, it might be useful here to define the function of a digital black box relative to such a way of working. This is a quote from Nicholas M. Kelly's article, Works Like Magic, Metaphor, Meaning, and the GUI in Snow Crash, which was published in Science Fiction Studies in March 2018. Quote, in the design suggestions of contemporary interface gurus, the ideal scenario is for the computer to function as a type of black box, as defined in the fields of computer science and engineering. Inputs go in and consistent, predictable outputs go out, but the actual workings inside the metaphorical box remain unclear. The technology is sufficiently advanced to be inscrutable, and for the user, intentions become computer commands as if by magic. Within the article, Kelly explores how Neil Stephenson's novel Snow Crash reflects on the role metaphorical devices play in graphic user interfaces by performing the magical task of making computers accessible, whilst limiting user control compared to command line interfaces. In Stephenson's 1999 essay, In the beginning was the command line, he makes this assertion explicit, claiming that graphic interfaces of computer operating systems limit the user's control, which can only be circumnavigated by learning to code. This project uses generative systems, or the project I'm going to talk to you about today, or show you, uses generative systems such as fine-tuned large language models and text-to-image technologies to call upon and build stacks of modular AI packages to broaden the scope of the flat image space I was frustrated by. These broader ontologies of networked modular stacks form what Catherine Hales has described in Unthought, The Power of the Cognitive Non-Conscious, as cognitive assemblages. I've been using high-level or more humanly understandable programming languages, such as JavaScript and Python, to interface with the black box throughout this project, building cognitive assemblages using JavaScript libraries such as 3JS to render graphics in real time from code in the web browser. Working with code doesn't unveil the inner mysteries of the computer. The magic of the computer remains as mysterious as ever when translating my high-level intentions into commands. Code does give me greater control over computational systems, though. As a programmer or hacker, as Stevenson refers to coders in his 1999 essay, I am, however, able to dive deeper into the stack of the cognitive assemblage. Code lets me tie different modules together into different combinations of functionality that produce variations of surface effects. Working in this way, I can generate spluttering audio output or flickering digital images that somehow register as embodied signals in meat space that are lively, uncanny, weird, eerie, or haunted. It is by experimenting with tying modules of the stack together in different combinations and by sifting through their combined surface effects, using my body as a filter through which I register signs of silicon-based life, that I am able to grab onto tendrils and follow pathways that resonate with some innate understanding of vitality. As I mentioned before, the digital image and sound works that I will show you today have evolved over the course of the research alongside the emerging hype train of generative AI systems and deep learning technologies. It is within the folds and seams of these cognitive assemblages that I search for signs of silicon-based life. Whilst looking for the human within the digital, I've been working through the different ontological layers of digital image and sound production in search of a vital life force within the machine that somehow resonates with the idea of being human. I trust my body, responding to embodied effects to technological effects, whilst augmenting technology with bodily traits such as lifelike movements, sounds, and the potential for creativity. I started the project 5 years ago, testing how digital cameras produce materiality as an index of reality in meat space. This early work extends the history of malleable reality in pre-digital photography. In Don't Taint the Index, Reconsidering the Promise of Pierce, Chris Belden Adams states, before the digital age, photography's conditional relationship to the real was reiterated with techniques such as lateral reversals, montage and collage, multiple exposures, retouching, hand-in painting and composite image-making practices, lenses, filters, fast-moving shutters, swiveling cameras that sequentially expose plates, moving film, masked apertures, and flash illumination further enable photography's expressions of a malleable realism. I began making images in the studio, mimicking how layers work in digital image software by layering different sheets of plastics and fabrics in the space between the camera's lens and the images displayed on the screen. So I was taking photos of the digital screen or images displayed on the screen with things in between them that acted like layers. Seen through the eyes of the digital camera, the tactile materials would add multiply, screen and colour the digital images they affected. Since layers were introduced by Thomas Knoll in Photoshop 3.0 in 1995, the machine's capacity to store, sample and flatten images into synthetic semiotic assemblages has augmented the two-dimensional digital picture plane to such an extent that the digital image now functions as an index of artificiality. Working on a hunch that the human can be located within the artificial, I trod a path of working inwards towards the machine, stepping ontologically closer to machine code. This has involved working with custom shaders in Unity and 3JS that punctured the onboard digital image by rupturing it with crude chroma keying effects. These effects were applied in real time in a way that superimposed the artificiality of the digital image back onto itself through code. So I was like revealing the artificiality of digital images as they're produced through green screen technologies by keying them out, by using chroma keying in a crude way that was kind of been, you've probably seen images like it before. Throughout this project, I have embraced a synthetic language that works according to the semiotics of the machine. My hunch is that life can be located within the digital in cognitive assemblages that combine dispersed and fractured technological agents and authors. The images and sounds I've made point to the potential for new forms of life that exist outside of the human body, whilst for now at least, being steered and controlled by it. Through the artworks I'm about to show, my hope is that vitalist aesthetics carve out a space through which silicon-based life can be better imagined. I've grouped these artworks into three categories that echo early explorations into how artificial intelligence was modelled and tested: simulation, emulation, and reenactment. Okay, so within these sections, I've made these animations that I call worm animations. These were the first works that I made to test how silicon-based life could be simulated within the screen. They're made in the 3D modeling software Blender and the simulation tool Houdini to simulate lifelike movement in digital objects. The objects maintain a figure-ground relationship that positions them as subjects in digital space. Cloth physics have been applied to the objects, which I've called worms, to animate them and make them twitch and wriggle in ways similar to how biological beings might move in meat space. The Houdini animations are experiments in making worms grow within the screen and add to their bodily mass over the animation timeline. I would like to migrate these works to games engines so they can perform new movements that differ every time they are activated in real time. But for now, the technologies, or at least my knowledge and abilities to steer them in ways that render them as convincing, lifelike forms that register as embodied effects that make you wriggle and squirm, are not quite there. Within the emulation section of these three categories, I've fine-tuned a stable diffusion LoRa model on works that I've made over the course of the research. To emulate the creation of the kinds of digital images that have spoken back to me over the course of the project, as I was saying, I've fine-tuned a stable diffusion LoRa model on 30 of these images that you can see here. Low-ranked adaptation models allow for more efficient fine-tuning of larger models, allowing us to adapt these models to create imagery of a certain style or subject using relatively small data sets. Most of the images used to train the LoRa model were rendered in Blender, using glossy materials that reflected the digital image space within their surfaces to circumnavigate digital flatness. So these are kind of images that I sort of felt spoke back to me in a way. To train the model, the images were accompanied by alt text metadata, subjective text-based descriptions of the image's surface from my point of view. So as I was training the model, I was writing these alt text descriptions. So This image here was accompanied by the text file, which included a Blender render, close-up of a white, black and blue patterned, coloured insect-like thing with lots of what could be legs or limbs in a big pile or mess. The surface of the object, its material, is shiny and reflective, almost glass-like digital texture. So format-wise, these descriptions began by stating the image type, which in the majority of cases here was a Blender render of, followed by a description of the image's specific content and appended with the image style, which for this model I defined as digital texture. And this is another example. This one was accompanied by the text, a Blender render of a glossy, crumpled surface with red, yellow and blue worm-like shapes on a grey background. The background is split into 3 or 4 diagonal striped areas. It seems like something else is being reflected in the image, white light reflections reflected from the Blender scene, digital texture. The totality of the alt text descriptions used to train the model can be seen here. Having full control over the language used to train the model allows me to cut up the text and arrange it in various ways. By referring to the different images from the model that the model was trained on, I can pick and choose different effects and image qualities from sets of images that I'm looking at and trying to combine, and use the corresponding text descriptions as new cut-up prompts to generate new images. When I showed these images to the artist Maggie Roberts, who works with the collective Orphan Drift and has been working with the synthetic language of digital imagery since the 90s, she was struck by the tightness of the feedback loop I was creating between myself and the AI. For me, the work is about the model itself and how it is imbued with the potential to emulate the creative decisions that I have made over the course of the project. I like the idea that through text-based prompts that effectively democratize the image generation process and offset my agency and authorship to a space outside of my body, that other people could use the model to generate images. So these are examples of the images that I've made with the model. Okay. Okay. The final section, reenactment, includes a piece of work I made called Python Glossolalia, which has been made in response to Neil Stephenson's novel Snow Crash, and the way that the story breaches the divide between the human and technological. Within the book, and I may be misremembering or misquoting this, when hackers or coders goggle into the metaverse and are spammed with Snow Crash images, the experience of looking at visual noise infects their brain with a computer virus that scrambles their senses and causes them to speak in tongues. The dissolving of boundaries between technical and human agents brought into being by hacking a biological code with a digital one was of particular interest to me here. Speaking in tongues, or glossolalia, is a form of speech practiced through religious sermons and occasionally under the influence of psychedelics that is full of intent but void of meaning. After researching online, I contacted the American language scientist Paul DeLacy, who has a long interest in glossolalia, to pick his brains and question him about his audio archive of glossolalic recordings. Paul brought my attention to the fact that although when people speak in tongues, they aren't communicating anything meaningful, they are following the same structure as regular language. Glossolalia can be analysed phonetically and broken down into separate phonemes. Within this, when people speak in tongues, certain sounds occur more regularly than others, creating a rhythm that perhaps acts as a vehicle for the speaker's intention. Speaking with Paul made me realise that, given the structural makeup of glossolalia, it will be possible to program a computer to speak in tongues. Python glossolalia is a real-time reenactment of computational tongues. The system uses a Python script to generate different length strings of characters selected at random from 2 arrays, one containing regular graphemes from the English language, and the other containing symbols representing the trills and irregular sounds more common within glossolalia. When it runs, the Python code generates a series of strings and sends them to a text-to-speech API run by the AI company 11 Labs to activate an AI voice cloned on my own to turn them into speech, which stream through live speakers within the computer. So now I'm going to play an audio sample that's been recorded from the program when it plays live.
Lang short, same, I'm going to some what's cool. Oh, there you go. That's a sing for bash. Vote and finish. We Susan, so now,
Lastly, I'd like to show an animation that brings one of the simulated animations together with the reenacted speech. This is from a series of works made for the online platform Blackbird and will be released online in the coming weeks. If you're interested in other elements of the project, they are archived and packaged at the website Surface Collider. Yeah, that's it. Thank you very much for having me.